by an illegal alien that ICE could have arrested if not for this city's policies. As a law enforcement officer, we work every day to ensure the safety of those in the communities we serve. And there's no worse feeling than when those innocent citizens you are sworn to protect are needlessly harmed. I also want to introduce a gentleman on stage with me. To my right is Thomas Decker, the Field Office Director for ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations here in New York City. To my left, I have some gentlemen from the New York PD Sergeants Benevolence Association, Vincent Vallilong, Mike Perugia, Edmund Small, and Paul Capitosto. They'll be available to answer any questions after this event if you'd like to speak with them as well. As much as I like New York City, I got to tell you, I hate that I'm here right now. As a 25-year law enforcement professional, it is unbelievable that I have to come here and plead with the city of New York to cooperate with us to help keep this city safe. And unfortunately, it's not a new battle. Myself and others within ICE and DHS, both in this administration and the last, have been trying for the better part of a decade to get the city to cooperate with ICE in furtherance of our shared public safety mission. Time and time again, our efforts and our warnings of the disastrous consequences of non-cooperation and even outright interference have gone unheeded, resulting in tragedies such as this one, and countless victims whose lives were forever scarred at the hands of illegal criminal aliens. And as long as politicians continue to put their own self-interests over those they have sworn to protect, and frankly, those who actually put them in office, this tragic situation will be repeated again and again. Make no mistake, it is this city's sanctuary policies that are the sole reason this criminal was allowed to roam the streets freely and end an innocent woman's life. So here I am again, pleading with the people of New York City and all other sanctuary cities in this country. Let ICE help you. Let us help you keep your community safe. We can actually prevent crimes such as these brutal sexual offenses and murders like we saw here this past week. These policies, plain and simple, both here and elsewhere in the country, make all of us less safe, which is the opposite of what the primary goal of every law enforcement officer, every law enforcement agency, and every elected official should be. Strong local partnerships and reliable cooperation are vital to successful law enforcement. Ask these cops up here. And as a career law enforcement professional, it's beyond frustrating to know that victims in communities across this country and in this city continue to suffer at the hands of criminals because those politicians choose to put politics over public safety. I'm going to open up to some questions, but before I do, I'm going to lay out some facts surrounding this issue and dispel a lot of the misinformation continually promoted by many in the media and many politicians. First and foremost, I'm going to explain to you what an ICE detainer really is. ICE issues detainers to advise local law enforcement partners that we have established probable cause to believe an individual who has already been arrested by that law enforcement agency for a criminal offense that is sitting in their jail is an alien who is subject to removal from this country under the United States federal law. ICE issues detainers and makes arrests based on probable cause, the exact same standard that NYPD and every other law enforcement agency in this country must adhere to when they make arrests for the crimes they're sworn to enforce. When we issue a detainer, we are simply asking to be notified prior to that alien's release and for our law enforcement partners to hold that individual for a brief period of time so that ICE may assume custody and prevent the release of that criminal back to the community. In many cases, especially in large metropolitan areas like New York, where our officers are concentrated, if the law enforcement agency gives us enough notice before the individual is released, we'll be there before they even roll over onto that detainer. And for those who obfuscate this issue by saying they don't want their officers asking immigration status and enforcing federal immigration law, like I saw the mayor's office say yesterday, let me put that false narrative to bed right here and now. We aren't asking you to. When we lodge a detainer, we have already made that probable cause determination. We are the ones making the enforcement action. All you need to do is call us before you release him. phone call. One simple phone call, and Maria Fuertes could be alive today. There's also going to be those who try to deflect criticism for these policies by stating that they would honor the ICE detainer if accompanied by a judicial warrant. The individuals who make this claim are either willfully ignorant of the law or are patently disingenuous. ICE does not need a judicial warrant to issue a detainer or to make an arrest. To be perfectly clear, not only do we not need one, we can't even get one. There is no federal judge, state judge, local judge, magistrate, anywhere in this country that has a lawful authority to issue a judicial warrant for a civil immigration violation. It's just not doable. The system set up by Congress gives that authority solely to supervisory immigration officers, and that is the framework under which we operate. What many of these politicians also decline to mention is that their officers make warrantless arrests based on probable cause every single day. When they respond to a domestic disturbance or they respond to somebody that's selling drugs on the street corner, they're not going down to the courthouse and getting a warrant for that individual and coming back. Because guess what? He's not going to be there. Law enforcement make warrantless probable cause arrests every single day, as do we. Let's also be clear about whom we are lodging detainers against. As I mentioned previously, these individuals are already sitting in another law enforcement agency's custody because they were arrested for a criminal violation. These are often serious, violent offenses. Yet this city's policies actively thwart ICE from exercising its statutory authority for the protection of you and your neighbors. Unfortunately, this incongruent application of laws often results in senseless, tragic victimization, such as we saw this week. These are preventable crimes, people, and more importantly, preventable victims. Most times, we don't even know the criminal alien's been released because these sanctuary jurisdictions won't even tell us. You know how we find out one of the criminal aliens we lodged a detainer against was released? Usually it's when they get arrested again and their fingerprints bounce off the FBI's database and come to us. We've seen recidivism rates as high as 50% in some of the areas in which we operate. Last year, ICE lodged 7,526 detainers against our New York ERO field office. I know the PD has put out stats that are about half of that, probably because the other half of the detainers they lodged, they didn't even pay attention to. They're probably just put in the shredder. The criminals against whom these detainers were lodged accounted for 17,873 criminal convictions and another 6,500 criminal charges. The crimes these individuals have been convicted or charged with included 200 homicides, over 500 robberies, over 1,000 sexual offenses, over 1,000 weapons offenses, over 3,500 assaults, and over 1,500 DUIs. I'll say it again, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. There should be nothing political about removing dangerous, recidivist criminals from our streets. It's incredibly unfortunate that those who value their own political self-interest over the safety of their and security of their constituents. It's utterly senseless. For those of you who do not know very much about sanctuary city policies, I encourage you to educate yourself fully about this issue. The facts speak for themselves, as unfortunately this country is rife with tragic examples of senseless, preventable deaths, deaths that even include cops. Those who politicize this issue want you to believe that you have to choose between being an immigrant-friendly city and being one that cooperates with ICE. Again, that is simply false. The only immigrants protected by such policies are those committing violent and dangerous offenses, often in the same communities these politicians are purporting to protect. This is a common sense public safety issue, period. For those who think sanctuary policies will keep ICE out of their communities, nothing could be further from the truth. ICE is mandated by Congress to enforce immigration laws of this country, and we will continue to do so regardless of the opposition from those who hold no allegiance to the law. On the contrary, sanctuary city policies leave ICE with no reasonable alternative but to increase enforcement in neighborhoods, workplaces, and the general public. The strains law enforcement resources, places the officers and the community at risk, and ultimately results in fewer criminals being removed from our streets. Despite these challenges, it's our duty to all of you to enforce the laws passed by Congress, and we are not going to stop fighting to keep your communities safe, regardless of whatever obstacles are placed in our path. One other common myth is that ICE performs random enforcement actions, random sweeps, or raids, the media likes to call them. Nothing could be further from the truth. 70% of the people that ICE arrests for immigration violations come to us directly from another law enforcement agency. As thankfully, the vast majority of law enforcement agencies in this country cooperate with us. Nearly 9 out of 10 people that we arrest are convicted criminals, have a pending criminal charge, are an immigration fugitive, meaning they've already had their day in immigration court and been ordered removed by an immigration judge and have failed to comply with that lawfully issued judge's order, or are illegal reentrants, meaning they've been deported previously, have come back illegally again, which is a federal felony and one we prosecute 7,000 times a year. Another myth that I'll address, which shouldn't even be a myth after you've heard what I said already, is that ICE only arrests minor offenders. That's completely false. Nothing could be further from the truth. In FY19, we arrested 123,000 people convicted of or charged with criminal offenses. And these criminals accounted for almost 500,000 convictions in criminal charges, to include 1,900 homicides, 10,000 sexual offenses, 1,800 kidnappings, 45,000 assaults, 74,000 DUIs, 67,000 drug-related offenses, and 8,000 gang members. One final point that I will address is what happens to an alien once ICE arrests them. Unlike some would have you believe, they are not whisked off in the middle of the night, never to be heard from again. Unless they are fugitive and have already had their day in court, an arrest by ICE is just the start of the process. Just as if the individual is arrested by NYPD or any other law enforcement agency in this country, there is a defined process in which the individual will have the right to a hearing before a judge with the Executive Office of Immigration Review within the Department of Justice. They have the right to present evidence on their behalf. They can be represented by counsel. They have the ability to apply for asylum and any other form of relief of removal, of which there are many. And if they don't like the ruling of the judge, they can appeal it. They can appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals, the U.S. Circuit Court, or ultimately the Supreme Court. But at the end of that process, if the judge has ordered them removed, and that removal order has been upheld through whatever appellate process the individual has availed himself of, it is ICE's sworn duty to execute that removal order. ICE must enforce the laws and rulings from an immigration judge, just like any other law enforcement agency must enforce the laws of their respective jurisdictions and judges. We have the most generous immigration system in the world, and the Congress has established a robust process through which one can apply to remain here in the country, even when they're here illegally. And that is something to be proud of as a nation of laws. However, in order to be a nation of laws, at the end of that process, an order from a judge must mean something if the rule of law is to mean anything. No other law enforcement agency anywhere in this country is being asked to ignore duly issued lawful orders from a federal judge. We cannot and we will not shirk our congressionally mandated responsibilities. I'll answer your questions, but I want to point to these two things on the stage right here and show what they represent. So this poster over here, these are individuals we know the detainers were declined, and they're back out on the street. You look at the crimes they were charged for: attempted robbery, first-degree assault, second-degree assault, assault that could cause personal injury, and criminal obstruction of blood circulation. And here, these are ones that are in jail now. These are ones that NYPD arrested recently. I'm sure the guy in the bottom center looks familiar. These are ones that are going to be released. So get to know their faces now, because New York's not going to cooperate with us, so at some point they'll be back in your communities, whether it's before they get sentenced, before they get convicted, or even afterwards. I got a case here that I just saw that the great officers in this office arrested a couple weeks ago. Individual got convicted for sexual assault on an 11-year-old kid. We told the Department of Corrections we wanted that individual. They didn't care. They released him. We went out and arrested him. So he's off the streets. So I will say it again. We are going to do everything we can to protect these communities in which we operate. I hope the politicians in those communities join us and find a way to work with us to do the same. I'll answer your questions now. Thank you. Ma'am.
I just have a question about Maria's time. If you thought it was a threat to public safety, how come ICE officials couldn't go out after he was released? And you have probable cause, you said. Why couldn't ICE officials then go out and arrest him?
We do. We have 600,000 immigration fugitives in this country. As I just mentioned, we had 7,300 detainers that we lodged last year that weren't honored. So we are out every day with our teams trying to find these criminals that have been released. That's part of the problem, and that's why we're begging these law enforcement agencies to work with us. They know. You go to any police department in this country, any sheriff's department, ask them how big their fugitive docket is. They all have fugitive dockets. You know why? Because people that are wanted do their best to avoid detection. So that's why, with limited resources, and from a public safety and officer safety perspective, the best thing that we can do is have that individual turned over to us in the safe confines of that detention facility while they're already being held by that jurisdiction for the criminal violation for which they were arrested. If they had turned them over to us, we would have them in our hands today, and Ms. Fuertes would be walking the streets safely.
Well, I know it would be easier, but the question is, in his previous time of beating up his father, do you think that rose to the level where it was at the top of your list to go pick him up after he was released?
Absolutely. We lodged a detainer for that sole purpose. But again,
Try to go find him?
we're out there every day trying to find all thousands. I just meant, we have more declined, we probably have 50-fold number of declined detainers than we have officers in this city. And those are just the ones that are declined. And those are just the ones that come through NYPD, not the ones that are released by the state or jurisdiction. So we're out there every day. That's the whole point of this issue, is that we are never going to be able to find every single person that these jurisdictions release. I guarantee you, we can arrest every single person they turn over to us in their facility. Ma'am? I hold the policies of this city, which were put in place by the mayor, as culpable in the fact that this individual walked the streets and was able to commit that crime. We get some. I mean, we can go back in time. We used to have an office at Rikers Island. Yeah. But I think it's important to let me answer the question fully, right? Because we used to have an office at Rikers Island. We were getting all these, you got to try pretty hard, and these guys can tell you, you got to try to end up in Rikers Island. They're not sending the choir boys there or the first-time offenders for public intoxication. We used to have an office there, and we would get all these criminals directly from the city, take them into custody, and effectuate their removals. So do we get some detainers? Tom, do we get any?
We get about maybe 10 a year.
10 a year. Out of 7,200 detainers.
You ran through some numbers. They were not the last set of numbers you went through. I think they spoke specifically about the New York
Correct.
area. Could you go through those and explain what those numbers are again? I couldn't tell how many. What did that?
Absolutely. Happy to do so. So I don't have those committed to memory.
And I'm sorry, you ran through them a little bit fast.
No problem. So for the field office here in New York, lodged 7,526 detainers last year. Those individuals, so again, these individuals are not, a lot of them are not first-time offenders, right? So for the 7,526 individuals against whom a detainer was lodged, they accounted for 17,873 criminal convictions, another 6,500 criminal charges. So that means if you took the rap sheets of all those 7,526 individuals and stacked them up, those are the crimes, the convictions and crimes for which they're charged. That's the aggregate number. What those included were 200 homicides, over 500 robberies, over 1,000 sexual offenses, over 1,000 weapon offenses, over 3,500 assaults, and over 1,500 DUIs. Thank you. Sir. But that's a New York City policy which says that. There's no federal law that says they can't hold him unless he's convicted. That's a policy established by this city and imposed upon the New York NYPD. So federal immigration judges have the authority to order people removed. They have the authority to give somebody asylum. They have the authority to let somebody out on bond. The authority to issue a warrant and a detainer, as set up by Congress, rests solely with supervisory immigration officers. So that's correct. Immigration judges don't have that authority. And they don't say the immigration, they're not asking, you don't hear the politicians saying, oh, we want the immigration authorities. In fact, we've seen when we have warrants of removal that have been issued by immigration judges, they say, oh, no, that's not an Article 3 judge. And in fact, I think the New York City policy or statute specifically references Article 3 judges, which are federal court judges and magistrates. They don't have the authority. So when you hear these people saying, oh, go get a warrant from a judge and we'll honor the detainer, it's false. They know we can't get a warrant from a judge because that judge doesn't have the judge would be violating the law to issue a warrant for a civil immigration violation. Ma'am. Yes. Sir. It's certainly accelerated their process back into our communities. We had an individual, an illegal alien, I believe it was Christmas Eve, tragically ran over somebody and killed them. And because their crime didn't reach the threshold under the Bail Reform Act to be held in custody, they were released the next day. And I think that individual was home celebrating Christmas with his family while the victim's family was mourning their lost one. We arrested that individual. So to your prior point, we go out there and try to arrest as many as we can. Unfortunately, when these individuals are here illegally, they know they're here illegally, they know we're looking for them, they're not going to raise their hand and say, hey, here I am. Yeah, there was one of their statements said that, you know, it's not NYPD's responsibility to question anybody regarding their immigration status. I've seen it. I think it was from the mayor's office, but I mean, there's about 10 articles out there in which they made. Yeah, just exactly what I just said. We're not asking any law enforcement agency to enforce immigration law. We are simply asking, when we tell you that you've got somebody in custody that you just arrested for a criminal violation, let us know before you release them. Hold them for a short period of time if we can't get there immediately, and turn him over to us so that he doesn't go back out in the community and hurt somebody else unnecessarily. Sir. You know,
yeah, the 10 detainers about which they honor, they claim fall into their local policy of which ones are covered that they'll actually honor. But again, that's 10 out of thousands and thousands and thousands of detainers we file. In fact, we have a great relationship with the NYPD police, but unfortunately with the administration of NYPD, what they did was on their website, they actually have on their website that we issued to NYPD alone 2,900 detainers. Now this is their count for their fiscal year, which ended for 2019 in June 30th. And out of the 2,900, in their website they boasted they honored 0. So again, the 10 came out of the Department of Corrections, and again, that's out of thousands that we placed.
right, and that's why it's so disingenuous when they came out and said in this instant case that they never received an ICE detainer. What's the difference? They said themselves they didn't honor a single one last year. And they did get a detainer, first off, but secondly, they said they didn't get one. So it's not only shame. You know what? If you're going to have a sanctuary city policy and you know it's going to result in people going back out to the street and committing more crimes, at least own it. At least stand up and say, yeah, that's our policy. Own it. Don't sit there and try to push the blame onto somebody else. That's disgusting. Sir. Yeah, from what I've seen, a lot of the judges started implementing it beforehand because they knew by the time the new year turned, they were going to be released anyway. So there's plenty of articles out there in the paper I've seen during the month of December where judges were starting to release people because 2 weeks from now the Bail Reform Act was going to kick in, so they might as well just release them anyway. Ma'am. Unfortunately, New York State in its infinite wisdom has again passed something else that's going to make its state and its communities less safe. That incident in Jersey City a few weeks ago at the Jewish market where individuals were senselessly brutalized and killed. HSI was one of the first people responding to that scene. And we couldn't even run the New York tags of the cars that were there to find out who the suspects might be. This month is Human Trafficking Victim Awareness Month. How are we going to conduct human trafficking investigations in the state of New York? Let's say we have a lead on a residence that's being utilized for prostitution by these traffickers. And we set up outside that house, we set up surveillance. And we see car after car come in, spend 2 hours and leave. And we can't pull that license plate to see who the hell that was just there brutally raping a 15-year-old kid that was illegally imported from Taiwan, someplace like that. How is that good law enforcement? How is that good public safety? Information is the lifeblood of law enforcement. That's why cooperation is so essential. That's why we have task forces. If I get someone who hasn't asked a question yet, sir. Hey, how are you? Several ways. First off, we got to start with the premise that these individuals are here illegally. All right, so they've already broken the law by being here illegally, whether they came on a visa and overstayed it, whether they came across the border illegally, whether they came with a false passport, whatever the case may be, they are here illegally. Above and beyond that, they have committed some other offense. A lot of times, and what we'll hear when people say, oh, it's a minor offense, is they're looking at the offense for what the individual was just arrested for and not their entire criminal record. So we may get an individual who was arrested for public intoxication. But when we run those individuals' fingerprints and his criminal history, we find out he's got a conviction for domestic violence from 3 years ago over in Jersey, and then 7 years ago he was convicted of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in Pennsylvania. So we look at the whole record of this individual to make our enforcement decisions. And I will tell you, and I was personally involved in the last administration having these discussions with the mayor's office when the prior administration had the priority enforcement program. The secretary, former director of ICE, myself at the time, I was assistant director for enforcement, begging and pleading, having meetings with the mayor's office over and over again, trying to find some way to even get a narrow set of cases, of charges that they would cooperate with us on. No. So. I'm not saying that. We are going to enforce the law equitably. That's what the rule of law means. That means that if you have broken the law, we're going to enforce that law equitably. Now, what happens ultimately after we make that arrest depends on each circumstance. Most of the people that we arrest, Congress has already determined that they're subject to mandatory detention. Congress has passed laws which state that this individual poses either a flight risk or has committed a crime which is so egregious that it renders them ineligible for bond in the federal immigration process. So a lot of those people that we arrest, 72% of the people in our custody are subject to mandatory detention. So when we arrest somebody for the crime, we may not even have the ability to release them, even if we wanted to, which we generally don't want to release criminals back to the street. There are some individuals that have the right to a bond. So those individuals whose crimes do not reach the level at which Congress has already subjected them to mandatory detention, they have the right to go in front of an immigration judge and have a bond hearing. The judge will ultimately make that determination as to whether or not they get released on bond, how much that bond may be, or whether they get held pending their hearing. Yeah, I mean, if you, look, our stats are consistent for the better part of a decade. If you look at what we do, who we arrest, our year-end reports are on our website. 3 clicks and you can see exactly what we do every year. And you look at the crimes we have. I just went through them: 1,900 homicides, 10,000, 12,000 sex offenses, 8,000 gang members. Do you think the New York City area's got a gang problem? And a lot of these gang members, they get charged with minor offenses because they don't have the evidence or witnesses willing to come forward to prosecute these cases. Should we wait? I mean, that's what NYPD said. Well, if this guy gets convicted, we'll give him to ICE afterwards. What the hell good is that? The crimes are being committed. The victim's dead. Too little, too late, New York. So, as I mentioned earlier, about 70% of the people we get are in custody. Most of the individuals that come to our attention is a result of their interaction with the criminal justice system, which in layman's term means they got arrested for something. When they get arrested, their fingerprints are run through FBI databases, bounce off our databases. We get notified that such and such is in custody in New York City, Jersey City, wherever the case may be, and then we do an investigation into that individual. If the individual has already been handled by us, we have their biometrics on file, we know what their criminal history is, we know what their immigration history is, we can lodge a detainer, we can establish probable cause based on that information we already have. But unfortunately, and where cooperation is so critical, is that a lot of these people have never been handled before. I mean, they've never been arrested by the Border Patrol, they never applied for a visa overseas, we've never arrested them, and we don't know who they are. And they're sitting in somebody's custody. What we want to do is go into those jails, interview that individual, determine who they are, why they're here, how'd they get here, all those things, and then make a determination at that point, do we have probable cause? The two prongs of probable cause for us to lodge a detainer or make an arrest is alienated removability. Is this individual an alien under the law, and are they removable? Have they violated some term of the Immigration and Nationality Act? Those are the two key factors. When we can't even get into the jails to make those determinations, those individuals walk free onto the street.
Let's talk about Ray's comment.
Ma'am,
Other than beating up his father, did anything else come up?
how much more do you need? Should he beat up his mother too? Should he kick the dog? I mean, how much more do you need to take an enforcement action against an illegal alien? And I'm answering you. How much more do you need? How much? What level? How much crime are we willing to accept from criminal aliens? Is it this much? Is it that much? I mean, really? That wasn't enough?
I can guarantee you every single one of our members want to help them out. Unfortunately, the way the policies are set up, they don't allow us to. And it's another law enforcement group. How do we have our own hands handcuffed to not be able to work with these guys? I mean, we're here not to go after, pick and choose what crimes are out there. We're here to actually enforce the law. And that's exactly what these guys are doing. And that's why we're here to support them today.
The mayor says he's always trying to look for ways to cut down crime. Will this have an impact on crime in the city?
Absolutely would impact crime. I mean, 1,900 people died at the hands of illegal immigrants that committed crimes. That's 1,900 lives that were taken off this earth. If it was just one, you just saved one whole family's life and the way that they have to go about their life for a generation. I mean, the mayor can say what he wants to say. He owns this. That's right. He should step up and say these are his policies. He owns it.
Sir. So what happens when somebody gets booked into custody for a criminal violation? Part of the process is indicating where that individual was born, right? So if the individual says he was born overseas, that records come to us. The records come to us whether or not we have a match or not. We get a fingerprint submission on all arrests that occur. If we get a report on somebody that was born in Mexico or Cuba or Ukraine, wherever the case may be, and we don't have an immigration record on this individual, then that's a flag, all right? We want to go talk to them. It doesn't mean he's here illegally. Could have come in under a different name, could have been a misspelling in the passport. Sometimes you get, a lot of what we get is U.S. citizens, right? So if you get individuals, a lot of them are born in Germany, right? Well, yeah, they were born on Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany. But we don't know if we don't have a record. So that's why we need to go in there, interview those individuals. And frankly, I started in 1994. That's the way, it's called the Criminal Alien Program. That's the way we did CAP, and that's the way we do CAP around most of the areas in this country. It's only in these sanctuary jurisdictions where we don't have that ability to do so. And I'll say one other thing to your question before. That's one of the challenges and concerns about the Bail Reform Act as well, is that a lot of these people aren't even going to get booked into custody, and also a lot of these sanctuary cities have stopped booking people into custody for violations. Again, although we're not going to book them in for minor violations, so yeah, so the guy may have gotten arrested for driving without insurance at this point, but he's got an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon or a narcotics trafficking conviction from 10 years ago. They don't even book him into custody, so we don't even know about him. If the vast majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people, if they had not been arrested for a criminal violation, we wouldn't even know they're here. Sir, in the back. case anyone. Not in the Bail Reform Act, and Frank, I mean, I can tell you though, we've had innumerable discussions from all the way to the former DHS secretary level down to mid-managers in ICE like I was, trying to find a way to work within the confines of this sanctuary jurisdiction, and those yielded nothing. I can talk to the wall and get as much out of we got out of those meetings. Look, the entire priority enforcement program that we had under the prior administration was compromised. It was the federal government saying, okay, we'll let you not turn over people to us for X number of crimes, but for these crimes here, can you please, pretty please, give them to us? And they still wouldn't do that. Sir? Look, I think if you look over the past 2 or 3 years, there's a much more visible presence of ICE ERO officers out in the communities because, you know, as we've seen, the entire state of California is a sanctuary state. We have lots of large jurisdictions in this country, Chicago, here's one of them, Philadelphia, where we're not going to turn a blind eye and put innocent people at risk because the law enforcement agencies in a certain jurisdiction don't or can't work with us. And frankly, to Vinny's point, most law enforcement, first off, if you go ask the line cops in any jurisdiction, they hate these things. And I've talked to many. A lot of these guys are repeat offenders, they're violent offenders, and these cops are out there day after day putting their lives on the line. It's got to be incredibly frustrating for them to arrest these guys, knowing they're here illegally, knowing that ICE could get them off the street, and 3 weeks later they're arresting them again, sometimes for a more dangerous crime or a more heinous crime. Most law enforcement agencies, cops are pretty black and white. We're here to enforce the law. We don't care whose law is enforced against. We do it equitably, we do it fairly, we do it professionally, we do it compassionately. But ultimately, we enforce the laws that we are sworn to uphold. The judges and juries, and they make the decisions as to what happens in those cases. That's not our job. It's not our responsibility, nor should it be. We enforce the laws that we're sworn to uphold. So we just started using administrative subpoenas in this context just this week. It's different than a detainer because administrative subpoena is merely looking for information that law enforcement agency holds. So that's one of those challenges we have with these sanctuary jurisdictions. Not only is it, and to your question, ma'am, not only is it we're not going to honor the detainer or we're not going to let you in the jail to perform interviews, we're not even going to share you the information. We're not going to tell you what address this guy put down when he got arrested. We're not going to tell you what car he was driving when he was arrested. We're not going to give you his driver's license number. We're not going to give you his passport number. We're not going to give you his alien registration card number. All these things that we would utilize to do a locate investigation to try to get these criminals off the street, they're not even giving us that. So these subpoenas are an attempt to at least defray some of the damage that's being done by these sanctuary policies to say, all right, fine, you're not going to give us the body, you're not going to cooperate with us, at least give us the information so we can go out and conduct an investigation. And they're not even doing that. So these subpoenas have been utilized in Denver. I suspect that we'll start utilizing them much more broadly as we go through the process. We're looking at every jurisdiction where we need to get that information. All right. Look, thank you. I appreciate everybody coming for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions off to the side when we're done. Appreciate it. Everybody have a nice weekend.